Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 128, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
And me, Ravi Abbott.
Now, we did want to have Joe on the show this week, but unfortunately he's bedbound at home.
How rock and roll? He broke his leg, or what?
Broke both his ankles.
Both his ankles dancing in the garden at a barbecue. This is Joe, you know, the heavy metal dude.
Yeah, who's often part of our crew. He didn't want us to say exactly how he did it. He said to me, "Can you just say like I was stage diving from a massive metal gig or something?" But yeah, he was drunk at his birthday barbecue and broke his ankle. So get well soon, Joe, if you are listening. We did want to have him on this week, but I don't even think he can muster up the energy to go to the phone. I don't think. Bless him. So hopefully he'll be get well soon, Joe. We'll see him at Play Expo in August. At London, I'm sure he'll be better by then.
Yeah, no crutches.
Yeah, I was going to say, or maybe a mobility scooter. Might get him one. So, of course, it is the summer's almost here. Play Expo is coming up at the end of August, gearing up for a big one. I mean, you were at Play Expo in Glasgow a couple of weeks ago. You've had a demo party recently throughout last weekend, and you survived.
It's just non-stop at the moment. You know, it's absolutely crazy. When it gets to the summer with these retro events, it's just mad.
Yeah, but I mean, there have been a lot of people getting in touch saying that they are going to be coming out to see us at Play in London, and also we're going to be back at Blackpool in October as well as another one coming up. So if you want to keep up to date with where the show's going to be on the road, if you want to come and check out the Retro Hour live, we keep our calendar up to date at theretrohour.com. And that's also the place that you can get in touch with us as well. Now, we do have obviously various ways to get in touch with the show. You can do it on Facebook. We've got an inbox on there that we check every day. We're on Twitter at Retro Hour UK, or you can do it the good old-fashioned way, email show@theretrohour.com. Now, we haven't done this for a while, but I checked the inbox. There's a few little letters that have come in. I mean, we haven't really pushed it for a while, so I'm not surprised there hasn't been many. But if you would like to get in touch, maybe you've got events coming up yourself, maybe you want to share something cool with us, a cool bit of news, maybe suggestions on people we should get on the show, they're always appreciated. Drop us an email and we'll hopefully give you mention on a future episode. Now, today, I want to say a big hello to Kel. He just got in touch to basically tell us about the fact that he loves retro and he's keeping the retro scene alive down in Brighton. Now, he organises a monthly pizza-themed games evening.
Oh, that sounds good.
With a group of his mates. They play retro consoles. They also have a late 90s style LAN party as well.
Oh, wow.
I used to love them. Do you remember carrying massive CRT monitors to your mate's house?
And you definitely need pizza and Coca-Cola for that.
And this year he's also doing a retro gaming weekend with everybody. They've also managed to find a church on Airbnb where they're going to have everything set up, consoles and PCs. He's got this brutal tournament with big prize bundles, an original PlayStation 1, Steam Links, a fully loaded RetroPie and a NES case as well. So he's going to be doing that in the summer, having a massive party in Brighton in a church. He hasn't given us any event details, but if you're going to get back in touch, Cal, we'll share that on our social media because that sounds massive.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I mean, if we can find a spare weekend, that might be one to go to. I think I'd love that. Also, Stephen Ball, now he's been in touch as well. Stephen also goes by the name of DJ Megatron. Now, he loves chip music. I think you and him have been having a bit of a chat about chip music, haven't you?
Yeah, because he works on a local radio station, right? Yeah,
well, his name is inspired by the Mega Drive. He's a big Sega fanboy. And he does a Geek News radio show on a community radio station called Radio Maghul. He covers retro gaming news on there, and apparently he regularly listens to the Retro Hour podcast in his studio for a bit of inspiration. So,
oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So you want to check him out.
Good to see that we're filtering out onto other stations and stuff.
That's all good, isn't it? If you want to get us on, just give us a shout one day. I'm sure we can do that. maghulradio.co.uk. And finally, Andy Trinkleback. He shared a picture of his retro loft. I didn't print them out this week, but look over.
See this.
Look at that.
I'm going to look at the monitor.
That's Andy's loft.
That's a loft that I want to be in.
It looks better than my living room. He's got an Amiga 500, an Amiga 1200 with a Blizzard 1260 accelerator card.
A G5 tower as well, I see
G5
there.
A
couple of BBCs.
Yeah, BBC Micros in here, Acorn Archimedes, Amstrad CPC, an Amiga 4000 with a Voodoo 3, a graphics card in there, load of Acorn machines, an Atari Falcon.
Oh, God.
He's got in there too. A Raspberry Pi, an MT32 for some MIDI fun as well.
Oh, that's awesome. I love the MT32.
Yeah, you've been getting into MIDI again recently, haven't you?
I love MIDI, yeah.
I would never leave that attic.
Well, my next thing is, I've been DJing with mods.
Yeah.
I want to get a bit of MIDI in there as well, Monkey Island MIDI version and stuff.
I was looking on eBay, actually, because do you remember LGR did a video, didn't he, probably about 6 months ago, all about MIDI on a PC, and he was doing stuff like the LucasArts games and
with the MT32 as well.
They're pricey now on eBay, though. I'm not sure whether it's because of his video, but they're a few £100 when I looked.
Oh, they've always been expensive, those units.
It would be good, but I'm not sure how many games I've got that would support it. Is it more a PC thing, I take it?
It's more a PC. Yeah. There's about 4 Amiga titles that do it, but yeah, I think... Modern Vintage Gamer's done a video on that one.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so check that out.
Yeah, so we'll put all those there. If you want to check those videos, wherever you'll find the links, we'll put them at the show notes at theretrohour.com. Speaking of amazing YouTubers as well now, we've got a group of guys on as this week's special guest. One of the biggest retro gaming channels on YouTube, Did You Know Gaming?
Yeah, they've got over 2 million subs and they're fantastic. They do it's video game trivia essentially, isn't it? It's like, did you know about this game? And the thing is, the facts that they come up with, absolutely insane. So we're going to talk about their personal passion for games, but also how they do their research and stuff. But it's a really good, fun conversation, this one is,
and you're going to find out some trivia that you probably didn't know about old games and systems. It's quite
obscure systems as well.
Absolutely. I watched a few of their videos recently, while we're researching for the show, and I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. I love videos that make you do that because you think you know everything about a game or a system that's been out 20, 30 years. But when you find out a new bit of information that wasn't widely known, it's always really cool, I think.
That's it. I think we've reached this point with the show that we're now learning every single time we're on it,
But we still come last in every retro video game quiz we go on, Ravi, so we're not quite there yet, are we? No. But maybe you'd like to share your knowledge.
I blame the beer.
That's probably got something to do with it. But of course, if you'd like to join in any of the conversations, maybe you've got some facts and stuff you'd like to tell us about, we're hanging out on Discord quite a lot these days too.
Yeah, Discord's absolutely fantastic. We're getting a lot of show suggestions and guest suggestions on there, so please join our Discord and have a chat in there. It's really good fun.
Now, before we get to the guys from Did You Know Gaming, we just want to give a massive shout to definitely our favourite people in the world. The people that keep the Retro Hour podcast coming week in, week out, allow us to bring you this podcast every week, allow us to get amazing guests, allow us to host events, and that's people who make a donation into the running of the podcast. Now, we accept donations, big or small. Every penny that we get into the running of the show really helps. And of course, 100% of what we get does go back into the running of the podcast. And it's so easy to do it as well. All you've got to do is go to our website, theretrohour.com. There's a little PayPal link in the side there. Fill your email address in.
Any currency.
Yeah, it'll translate it all. You're into cryptocurrencies on there as well, if you do, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all of that. And just for making a donation, big or small, you'll find your place in the Retro Hour Hall of Fame. By far the best accolade in the world of retro gaming.
And I'd just like to mention, thank you for some of the Bitcoin donations recently. We don't know who they're from because Bitcoin's anonymous, but thank you whoever you are.
And it's back on the up again, Bitcoin now, isn't it?
Wow, yeah.
A big crash a couple of weeks ago. It can only get better. So this week, the people we do know who definitely donated into the Retro Hour podcast, thank you for your support, John Cook,
Colin Purvis,
Ron Van Scherp,
and Christopher Baker.
Thank you so much for your donations, guys. It really does help us a lot, and you can do the same by heading to our website, theretrohour.com. Now, before we get into our interview this week with the guys from Did You Know Gaming, I never thought I'd see this. A Silicon Graphics handheld.
Now, Dan, I thought you would absolutely love this. So, Silicon Graphics, all of you guys will remember that old school demos that they used to have. And this was before the N64 and all of this. These were the most powerful machines you could get, the Silicon Graphics.
Well, let's put it into perspective. Silicon Graphics were used for the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
You go back to the early 90s. They were the workstations to have. And I remember there was a demo on Bad Influence, and Andy Crane, when we had him on a couple of episodes ago, he did talk about this machine. He'd forgotten what it was called, about this machine that was the size of a photocopier.
That's it. It was absolutely huge, wasn't it?
That was a Silicon Graphics workstation. And even today, I drool over those. I never thought I'd see a handheld Silicon Graphics workstation,
No,
though.
because of the sheer size of it.
Yeah.
Now, this is called the Alice 4, actually, and it was at the Maker Faire in the Bay Area in America.
Yep.
Now, this is really cool. It's an FPGA, and it's been built from the ground up to run these demos in real time. So it's a field programmable gate array. It basically recreates a Silicon Graphics machine, like on chip.
Yeah, they cost $99.
Yeah.
So, how much did they cost back in the day? I think they were about
$16,000 or something.
I think they were more than that. I think they were about $250,000, I think, some of the high-end ones. But now, what's really cool is this is in a little white box with a red button on the front.
And the red button, you just press and play the demos. That's all it's designed to do. And it's open source as well. So maybe people are going to add extra items to this and kind of get it a bit bigger. But, the fact that you can just whip out this little box and be like, do you want to see some Silicon Graphics from the 80s? And then
it's insane. Well, the good thing about this is as well, the guys behind it, Brad, Lawrence, Mike and Chris actually used to work at SGI back in the day. So you think if anyone knows the hardware and how to kind of recreate it, it'd be these guys. That's just awesome, though. I love nerdy stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. And you know, they're saying they found the demo code on a ratty old FTP server.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they basically took it off and then kind of started to chuck it into this FPGA, which is really cool to see that period of computers kind of just captured in the little box.
Well, the thing about it is, I mean, I'm not sure. I'm sure someone will correct me if so. But I don't know if there is an SGI emulator that you can get for a PC. Because I've been doing a lot of video recently, kind of, it's taken me a bit longer than I thought, but about the N64 and its kind of history and stuff and kind of exploring it a bit. And I found a few YouTube videos of kind of early N64 demos that ran on the Reality Engine that was like a graphics.
Was that like the dolphin stuff?
Yeah, there was the sharks that were swimming, and there was kind of a flyover one as well.
Yeah.
And they ran, it was a thing called the Reality Engine that was a big kind of graphics card that you plugged into a Silicon Graphics workstation, give it a lot of 3D power to run graphics. But there was a couple of like really low resolution videos that I found on YouTube of people actually showing these demos, but they've even uploaded them so people can download them. And was like, well, how do I run this? You actually need one of the machines.
Well, this is the thing, you're gonna be able to see it in the full kind of graphical output as well. So maybe there'll be high quality captures of it now as well.
But even if you look on eBay, getting an original Silicon Graphics workstation, they still cost a fortune.
It's delivered on a forklift truck.
Well, there is some smaller ones. There was one called the Indie. Don't you remember that? A bit like a pizza box.
Yeah.
And it's like light green. That looks really cool. I mean, one thing about the SGI machines is, especially when they got into like the mid-90s to the early 2000s, they looked so funky.
Yeah, they did.
Yeah, weird like kind of bubble shapes and all that.
You
as
wanted
well.
one on your desk, didn't you?
Yeah, I still do to this day. But I've kind of been looking at like kind of workstation computers recently. Because we had Retro Man Cave on and he got a Nextcube, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he's talking about that. And recently I've had a bit of a craving for like, because I've got a Sun workstation that, has got Solaris on there. And I know nothing about Unix, but I managed to get it up and running. But now I'm thinking I wouldn't mind a Silicon Graphics workstation, render Jurassic Park in my bedroom. So, so if you don't see me for 6 months, that's what I'm doing. But maybe I can do it on an FPGA for £100 now. So if you want to find out more about that, I mean, it's deliciously geeky. I'll put a link to that in the show notes at theretrohour.com. A couple of weeks ago, we were talking about Sonic the Hedgehog toaster.
Yeah.
That Sega are crowdfunding at the moment. Maybe a toaster's not enough. After you've had your toast, you want to run to work, you need some shoes to get you there.
Oh, there you go. You've got to run fast, got to go fast.
Well, Puma, who are a name I've probably not heard for about 20 years anyway, Puma trainers were cool back in the day, weren't they?
Well, I don't know. It was good with some people and some people would diss it, in my circles at least.
I remember at my school, I think it was obviously Nike and Reebok. Like the big ones. I had Reebok pumps. I remember that. Like the coolest thing ever. I got them on my 10th birthday. Actually,
right. Wait, guys, I've just got to pump up my shoes.
Yeah, when the bigger lads were chasing you. Wait a minute. But Puma, I mean, it's a name that I think if you wore Puma trainers at school, you were all right. It wasn't Gola. You didn't get beaten up for wearing them. But now Puma, who are still around, have teamed up with Sonic to create Sonic the Hedgehog trainers. Now, for our American listeners, sneakers.
Yeah, and this just shows that Sega are really pushing it at the moment. We've been talking nearly every single week about how Sega's bringing out something new, how they're trying to hit new marketing areas. They had that Primark launch as well recently, which was, all kind of computer game fashion. I think we're going to be seeing people walking around in PlayStation, Sonic stuff and N64 T-shirts for a long time, and it'll mostly be dads.
Well, the thing is... If you miss the episode, I think it wasn't last week before, we were talking about the toaster, and we read out Sonic's description on their website that was like way over the top, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, it does seem like they're doing it tongue-in-cheek now. So do you want to hear the description for these new Sonic the Hedgehog trainers then? So
okay.
They're inspired by Sonic's strive to be forever faster. Puma and Sega have teamed up to create Puma X Sega RS0 Sonic trainers, inspired by the Sonic universe. They put a lot of effort into making these, citing that the upper textured suede represents Sonic's fur, while the checkered outsole is inspired by the roads that Sonic runs on.
Trainers are a pretty serious thing, so maybe there'll be some trainer geeks reviewing these on YouTube and stuff like that.
I actually watch a few on YouTube. There's Addy Sneaker Freak. Have you seen him before?
Well, I'll tell you, the weird thing is that Retro Bright, that's been used on all the consoles to remove yellowing, is also used by trainer restorers on YouTube.
Okay.
So they have a whole section of Retro Bright videos, and I started to get into them because I was like watching Retro Bright and they came up in my similar suggestions. So there is some weird connection with retro computers and old school trainers.
And people do collect trainers like games.
Yeah.
There are guys that have got 80s trainers in cupboards on display and all that. So, yeah, I guess there is quite some crossover there. But I'm loving the fact that there's been so much Sega merchandise coming out. In a couple of years, we've had Sega, Sonic the Hedgehog curtains in your bedroom and all sorts. So maybe a Sonic the Hedgehog toilet seat.
Oh, that'd be great. I need a new one. Yeah, broke it the other day.
Poop faster. So if you want to find out more about that, I'll put a link in the show notes at theretrohour.com. Now, we talked about the first generation of these 8-bit-do controllers last year on the show after E3. And obviously we've had E3 in the last month again. They've been there demoing some kind of retro-inspired new controllers.
Yeah, so these ones are kind of aimed at the Switch and consoles like this.
Yeah.
They're also the PC. And they kind of look a really weird mix. They're like a mix of the SNES controller, but the Palmer Violet one.
Yeah.
With the original PlayStation controller. But then you've got some analogs in there as well.
Well, this looks like to me, last year we did talk about the SN30 Pro. That was kind of a recreation of the NES controller, wasn't it? But it had analog sticks on.
Yeah.
And this is now called the SN30 Pro Plus. To me, it reminds me of a Nintendo Switch Pro Pad. The Pro controller, the same kind of form factor. A bit like an Xbox One kind of controller, but a bit curvier. And again, it does kind of, like you said, it borrows the colours from the American version of the Super Nintendo. Apparently there's only one prototype that's showing off at E3, and the journalist here on our PC World, actually, the article reading this off, who actually do some really good articles about hardware, believe it or not. They didn't get a chance to feel it because it was only one prototype. But apparently there's some interesting changes. It looks a bit more ergonomic than the original model, because that kind of boxy NES controller, it was all right for the 80s, but I wouldn't want a game for a long period of time using that.
Well, they've got plenty of controllers here, so they're actually talking about the Zero 2 as well, which is really interesting. It's a microscopic controller, and it features Bluetooth and motion controls. And they're actually saying, this is good for the Game Boy. And
But it's inspired by the Game Boy, apparently, the colours that you've got for it.
Yeah, so I'm thinking maybe, can you get a little Bluetooth adapter or something? There might be a little hacked one for the Game Boy or something.
Well, I don't know if these are made for PC gamers, I think, mainly, but I'm sure someone can make it work if not. And the next one they got, though, the N30 Pro 2, looks like a GameCube controller.
Yeah.
Again, the SN30 Pro they did as well. That's got the rumble in there, USB-C charging port there too. The thing about it is they're saying that the problem remains from the original one when they reviewed that the thumbsticks on it are very uncomfortable. But it is kind of the analog controller from the GameCube controller, which I never was a big fan of anyway.
I'd say they're like marriage or kind of mashup ones here, where they've got 2 or 3 systems and they've inspired it to make a new controller out of it. It's really cool actually, because it's creating something that never existed before but feels similar.
One thing they're kind of slating it for a little bit, which I actually don't agree with, is the saying that it's kind of bad they took out, because the last generation of these had an internal rechargeable battery.
Okay.
But now it runs on AA's. Yeah. So they're kind of saying, is that a step back? But then the thing about it is, if you've got a controller and the battery in it is built in, you can't take it out, and it dies over time. Because rechargeable batteries have got a limited recharge, lifespan.
Yeah, and you can get the lithium ones now as well, so they last a lot longer than the alkaline.
Yeah, but the fact that if you can replace them, the controller can last forever then, really, can't it? And they say they will probably be coming out with a rechargeable pack, which I think is a nicer way of doing it, having a pack that you can replace after 10 years if it's starting to lose its charge. So I think it's cool. Anything like that, especially if you're into emulators too, it's always nicer to play it on a controller rather than trying to, play old games on a modern keyboard. Never feels right, does it? And tell us about this new Amiga game then.
Yeah, so this is called Worthy, and it's worthy of us talking about, because it's not just one of your...
You've been working on that for a while.
Yeah. Bum. It's just not one of your PD titles. This is like a full release, and it looks awesome. The graphics on it are really nicely done, actually, the pixel art, and it's released for all 1 megabyte PAL Amigas. So that's, your 1200, your CD32 as well, and your Amiga 500. So they've got a box CD version, which I assume is going to work straight with the CD32. They've got box floppy version, but you can also buy it digitally for $10. Yeah. So that's really cheap.
So it's a new commercial game for the Amiga. Now, the team that are behind this, Alex Brown actually got in touch with me just before I went on holiday, actually. It's the same team that did Blocky Skies.
Oh, okay, yeah. Blocky Skies was a good title as well.
Yeah, that was in, 2016? I think I did a YouTube video on that, actually, if memory serves me right. So I've actually got a copy of it off Alex. I've been away, haven't had a chance to try it yet, but hopefully I'm going to get a video recorded on that, probably by the time the show comes out. So if I did, I'll put a link in the show notes at theretrohour.com in this week's show. But what I like about it is the fact that playing Blocky Skies, that was a commercial quality game.
Yeah, that's what I mean. This is not your PD shovelware or anything like that. It's the physical version comes with a full color manual, floppy disk stickers, as well. So it's a proper title, and it looks lovely. Actually, it looks like one of the late Amiga platformers, I'd say.
Well, he sent me a bit of information about it. He goes, there's a floppy ADF, an installer for the hard disk, a CD32 compatible ISO image. There's also the Worthy Extras disc. There's got some extra stuff as well, like poster images, desktop wallpaper, and it will run on, like you said, an Amiga 500 with a megabyte of memory upwards, really. 32 colours, 50 frames a second, 40 levels in there, including a really cool boss level, he says.
It reminds me a lot of kind of just these old school, and it's like, it looks quite like Putty Squad, actually.
Yeah, graphically.
Yeah.
So,
but it's got this old school RPG feel, and it actually has quite a modern feel with it. The same with Blocky Skies had a modern indie game feel with it.
Yeah, and that was written in pure assembly as well, so it ran really nicely. So that's the thing. A lot of a lot of the modern titles for old systems are kind of written in like stuff like kind of creation packages, and they don't run as well because which I admire. Anyone that wants to try and make a game in a retro system's cool, but to really get the full quality out of the hardware and get all the performance, you need to do assembly code, don't you? And really, hit those chips.
You do, and it's awesome when you see it done properly.
Yeah, so it's really cool. Definitely get behind this. You can find out more in our show notes. As I said, I'll put the link in there as well. And that is, of course, the same place that you can find out everything that we talked about this week. All the links will be in there. The same place that you can donate to the podcast if you want to help us out. Find out which events are going to be out throughout the summer too.
Send us letters.
Yeah, do send us letters. Keep those coming in. show@theretrohour.com. Right, I think we've waited long enough. Let's chat to a group of guys who just have a passion for video games.
And I think you probably know these videos because everybody that searches for something on YouTube, there's always a little suggestion in the corner that says, "Oh, did you know gaming?"
Well, now you do.
Yeah.
Because this week's special guest, the guys from Did You Know Gaming? You're listening to the Retro Hour podcast, and it's time to welcome this week's very special guests, because we have got more than one. Let's welcome Greg, Matt and Daz from Did You Know Gaming. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Now, let's just get a bit of background on you guys first, because I'm sure a lot of our audience will be big fans of your YouTube channel and your website as well. I mean, let's start with you, Greg. I mean, what was kind of your background with gaming, and how did you initially get into gaming?
Gaming? Well, I mean, I played it since I was a child, since I was a little baby. Played video games because it's what everyone did. It's what my friends did anyway. Got my Sega Mega Drive when I was about 4, probably, and then just never looked back, just staring at the screen ever since.
And what about you, Matt? What was your first system?
The Spectrum,
wow.
ZX Spectrum. Yeah, my dad had one. So I started with that, and then I went on to the Master System. I was always a console behind, so when everyone had a Mega Drive, I had the Master System. Then I got the Mega Drive when people had a PlayStation, and but yeah.
What about you, Daz? Then were you ahead of the curve or behind?
I kind of was lucky because I had quite a lot of brothers who were really into gaming. So from the moment I was born, I had pretty much everything around me, But I think the first console I really remember playing properly was the Amiga, which isn't really a console. It's more a computer. But yeah. Same thing.
What kind of games were you into on the Amiga?
Everything, because it was all totally legally obtained, obviously. But I can't really think of any games in particular besides
Monkey Island is a
Monkey Island
contender.
and Zool are like, yeah. Those are the two.
What kind of games then changed your life, guys? Like, which ones were the ones that totally gripped you? We'll start with Daz.
For me, it's kind of a cliche now whenever anybody talks to me, but I always talk about it. There was a PlayStation 1 game called Suikoden, although I couldn't pronounce it, so I called it Suikoden. And it was like a sort of JRPG about bringing 108 heroes together to overtake a corrupt empire and bring liberation to the people, that kind of thing. I don't know why it really had such an impact on me, but I've never let go of it.
And was there a game that you sunk a lot of time into then, Greg?
I think the first game I really remember sinking lots of time into was probably Final Fantasy VII, was like the really big one, where I was like hundreds of hours, just get everything, everyone's level 99. Also was a big fan of Diablo. We had,
man.
At Daz's house, we had it on the PlayStation, and that is not a good version of the game.
So have you guys been like friends for a long time then?
You could say that, yeah.
yeah.
Me and Greg have been friends since birth, and I became good friends with Matt. I can't remember how old we would have been now.
We were in second school, middle school, kind of. How old were we?
Probably
10, 8?
Yeah, 10.
Yeah.
I've not been able to get rid of these guys since.
Yeah.
Well, were you like fans of gaming magazines, and did you watch any gaming television?
Yeah, the PlayStation demo discs were our life. Like,
That's right,
getting PlayStation magazines was so important at the time.
Even actually, I remember reading quite a lot of the Nintendo official magazine because they didn't really care to stay professional, and I thought it was really cool.
I think you did make a good point about those PlayStation demo discs, because they were, before the days where you could just download stuff, they were like a lifeline, the only way that you could really try out new games if you couldn't afford
Oh,
it.
yeah. I remember getting... And they used to come with the packs of, like, I guess, indie games, like the Net Neurosi packs, and they were just... Some of those games were glorious.
Yeah, well, the first time we got Terra Incognita, I think it was called, which was a Net Neurosi game, that was... pretty mind-blowing. I think the guys who made it went on to make some pretty crazy stuff. I think they're really popular game developers now.
Yeah, because that was a full RPG, wasn't it? And it was amazingly well done. It looked like Skies of Arcadia or something like that.
Yeah.
When you look back and consider the fact that that was indie gaming back then, and that game was very impressive considering, everything else was kind of, here's a Tetris clone or a Puyo Puyo clone. And that was like, well, we don't really have the resources to make it, but let's make a full-blown RPG. Why not?
Yeah, some weird isometric.
And I think, the Net Neurosi as well, it was quite cool that Sony actually did give you a development platform. So that's quite rare. You don't really get affordable ones really from manufacturers.
Yeah, and it looked way cooler than the normal one.
Yeah.
Because it was black, and that makes it cool.
So what's the story behind Did You Know Gaming then? How did you guys form that, and what was the need for it then? Why did it come about?
I kind of formed it with a guy called Shane who does it with us. He's from Sheffield, but now he lives in America. And we kind of put it together because we realized there was a lot of... It was very early days of social media now I sort of think about it, which is kind of weird. But there were a lot of did you know facts for science and nature and all this sort of stuff. And we were like, well, video games are pretty cool. We know a lot about them. Let's make images for that. And then it kind of moved to YouTube fairly quickly. I think within a year we went to YouTube, and it was just immediately interesting to everybody, it seems. We were quite lucky that we had a group of friends who helped us kind of promote it. And then eventually I sort of brought Greg and Matt on board because these guys know gaming as well as I do. And it just made sense. It made it more fun.
Well, looking at the videos you guys put out, I mean, you put about, I think it's about 3 in the last, week or so? You put out quite a lot, don't you? I mean, what's kind of your roles there? What do you all do individually? I
mean, we hire some freelancers to help us out with videos in terms of editing and sort of writing and research and stuff. We kind of spread it amongst quite a lot of people, but the 3 of us kind of do a bit of everything, I guess. It's kind of hard to determine what we all do, besides Greg, who just does all of the video editing for us because he's really good at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I heard you did a lot of kind of Facebook trivia groups and stuff earlier on, and that kind of maybe influenced you to get into this gaming trivia stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I personally, sorry, I don't mean to rattle on, but early days of Did You Know Gaming, these guys weren't so much involved. But I ran or still run a website called The Spriters Resource, which I already had kind of a connection with a market, so to speak. I don't really call it a market because everything I've done has always been a free content kind of thing. But I had a good idea of sort of how to put images together and graphic design of that kind of sort and how to share it. And it just kind of worked really well.
Did you ever go to gaming pub quizzes and stuff like that?
To be honest, only recently. Like, they now have one in Norwich every month, which is really fun. But not back in the day. Gaming wasn't really so much that kind of scene, you know?
No, it'd be like an odd question in a pub quiz, but it would never be the center of the pub quiz kind of thing.
Yeah, it's true.
We just hosted one for the Norwich Gaming Festival, which was fairly popular. We didn't have a precise number of people, but we did it with Stuart Ashen.
Yeah.
And that was amazing. It's kind of one of those things where I sometimes forget, if I go back 15 years and think about the idea of that being a thing, it would be nuts.
Maybe one day we'll have like a university challenge kind of show on the TV.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Oh.
Yes.
Just don't invite Larry, because he'll beat all of us.
His encyclopedic knowledge.
Honestly, there's a reason they call him Guru, because it's scary.
So have you guys always kind of been interested in kind of obscure video game trivia? I mean, have you kind of picked up like weird facts along the way? I mean, what about you, Greg? What was kind of your interest in that?
I think I'm a bit of I'm a kind of trivia person, you know. I like watching The Chase. You could say I'm a professional. No, just always had an interest in, like, because you get to find out more about the people who, like, the thought that went into the game, especially when you get to see all these like fun jokes that they make within the game, but like hidden or, you know, just like stashed away inside. It's just nice to see the inner workings of how the people think when they make them, you know?
What's kind of your favourite bit of video game trivia then? Anything like that springs to mind?
There's a really nice one about, I think it was for Virtua Tennis. They were planning on, at Wimbledon, painting the logo on trained pigeons, and then they were going to have them fly in front of the audience. But they weren't allowed to do it in the end, because they train hawks to attack and kill pigeons at Wimbledon to stop pigeons hanging around. So it would have just been this like pigeon massacre with
Not the best for PR in hindsight.
No,
yeah.
maybe not.
So you had a pretty meteoric rise when you did get onto YouTube. I mean, you're currently on to over 2 million subscribers on your channel.
Yeah, just under 2.2 million, I think.
Why do you think this is, and what do you think attracts people to your channel?
That's a good question. I don't know.
I just think it's that information that is not sort of, you know, with DVDs and everything you got making ofs, and it's kind of films, it's quite common knowledge and stuff, whereas actually people don't realize when they play games that there's a really interesting sort of history to quite a lot of these that aren't just sort of put out. And I think just little bits of nuggets of information is always kind of, I don't know, just like with the science and the nature and other videos, people are kind of always intrigued by these kind of things that they don't know.
I think one of the main draws that we had early on, which was somewhat intentional, and also because of, all of us being very self-conscious at Digital Gaming, we got other YouTubers who are our friends to do voiceovers for us. And so as a result of doing that, it kind of showed fans of those games that they could watch the video from a voice that they would recognize for that game within the YouTube community. So, for example, we had JonTron early on doing Banjo-Kazooie, and everybody knows JonTron for his Banjo-Kazooie coverage. And in doing that, we managed to promote our own channel, promote their channel, and moving forward, we kind of kept playing on that in a way and do self-promotion as well as promoting others. In a way, actually, it's helped some friends of ours now, because our friend Jim, or Cad Icarus, was really small when we first put him on there, but we loved his videos, and he only covered sort of PlayStation 1 games. And so we got him to do voiceovers, and now he's got, 600,000 subscribers or something, and it just works really well to do that cross-promotion.
Well, your videos are really well researched, and, putting something out there, you must really have to get your facts checked. How do you get this information together, and do you have like a group of researchers or something?
We have some freelance researchers who we sort of hire on. For example, Liam Robertson is very well known in the games journalism scene for basically leaks and finding unreleased games and stuff like that. So we try to find people who know about specific things and try to bring them on board for certain topics. But we also put together a website called VG Facts, where people can submit trivia, and they have to provide a source for it, and it's all manually checked and made sure it's all kind of it's all there and it's all verified. And then we can actually kind of use that as a good basis for finding things that we can then research some more.
Yeah, exactly. Once we find because usually they come in the form of like a short paragraph, but obviously that's not enough for sort of video content. So then we kind of dig a little deeper, and you always end up stumbling across something like, how far does the rabbit hole go into this research, basically?
And sometimes it goes very, very deep.
Sometimes.
How do you find stuff, though? Do you look through old magazines? Are you on archive.org looking at the old magazine archives and that kind of thing?
Yeah, archive.org is actually a fantastic resource.
Oh, it's a lifesaver.
Yeah, because the amount of information that official companies, they will put it up on their own website and then, a few months later go, oh, wait, maybe we shouldn't be telling people this sort of stuff. In fact, that's one I always remember was Naughty Dog had something about how in one of their early Mega Drive games, they had like a naked lady at the beginning as an Easter egg. And they had it on their website, but they didn't confirm or deny it. But it was totally true, because why would you bring it up if it wasn't there?
Even like the magazines and stuff on there as well. I mean, I love the fact that you can go on and read old issues of Amiga format now, on your iPad and swipe through them. A lot of people don't realise they're on there, but they must be good research material as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I've constantly been reading the old Nintendo magazines in particular, because there's so many games which they kind of bring up and then never mention again, and they never get released. And I always found that fascinating.
Which ones kind of stick in your mind then of games that you were looking forward to or you read about that never materialised?
There's one, I'm trying to think of it right now, in particular from a Nintendo magazine. I can't remember the name of it, but it was like BioApe or something. And it was like a crazy fast platformer game with up and vertical and horizontal scrolling and all this sort of stuff. And it looked amazing, but they just never released it. And I was kind of disappointed. But there's tons of unreleased games that I would love to play.
We do another show called Region Locked, which is all about the sort of regional exclusive games that never made it over. Mm-hmm. There are some pretty good ones there that were always supposed to get releases outside of Japan, and they just never quite got it. The Yakuza 0 is a really good one, which is it's a really decent Yakuza game, actually. I mean, I can't see why it would never move over, because it's like Yakuza but set in ancient Japan, like the Edo period or something.
It wasn't Yakuza 0.
No,
it was
Ishin. It's called
Ishin. Yeah,
Yakuza Ishin. Yeah, and I thought that's a really good one.
I always love as well that when games got so much hype and then they failed to live up to it. I actually got a tweet the other day of a lady who found a copy of Rise of the Robots, a cartridge, and she wanted to know how much it's worth, and I was like, well, it's fairly common. So it might have value for being a terrible game, but I mean, do you remember any examples like that where you were all hyped and then something was awful?
Yeah, that never happens.
Diablo 3.
No Man's Sky. I mean,
No Man's Sky.
Oh, yeah.
The thing is, I don't think I ever trusted them from the start, because it was such a tall order. I thought it can never be as good as they say it is. How can it work? And it doesn't.
Well,
there's been so many games where they just give an idea, and I'll go, that's a great idea, and then the game is not that idea, and that's the worst part.
Has there been any systems released that unreleased that you've kind of wanted released? The Vapor systems that people would kind of talk about for a long time.
What was it called? The Phantom.
Yeah.
The Phantom
ironically
game console.
Named Phantom.
That machine would have absolutely blown everything out of the water if it existed. I mean, there were no details about it, and it was totally not a real thing, and it was probably just a sort of way of scamming people for money, but it would have been the best system ever.
What was the Phantom meant to be then?
So it was effectively like a Steam machine before Steam machines. It would have had a sort of a Windows game marketplace on it, where you had your controller hooked up, it hooked up to your PC, it hooked up to your TV, sorry, and you could kind of download games through an online service. You could play online with your friends, all with a controller-based interface and blah, blah, blah. I mean, realistically, it's Steam big picture mode. But back in the day, Steam didn't exist, and it was just a fantastic idea for a console.
Yeah, I think they made some pretty bold claims about the internet speed and the ability to download.
Yeah.
Download games in like 7 minutes or something, and they're talking about 700 meg games. But this is back in early 2000s probably, and you just think, no way.
Yeah, there was all of their claims were completely ludicrous, including like the specs that they had kind of given for quite late on in their kind of existence as a company. They went on to do a lap board, which is like a keyboard with a mouse pad on the side, which I don't think is actually very good. But that was like the selling point of the console as well, is that you could play your PC games from the sofa with a mouse and keyboard. And that would have been sick, because I still want that. There's not really any accessible way of doing it besides like get a piece of wood and stick a keyboard on it.
I did see some really comfy things when I went to Scotland. My friend had this, it was like a padded kind of system with a keyboard on it and a mouse, and you could plug USBs in the back and just sit on the sofa. I will send you a link.
Yeah, that's the kind of stuff you want, right?
Yeah.
But downloading 700k over a 56k modem, I think, back in 2000, I remember it'd take you like half an hour to download a 3-minute song off Napster, wouldn't it? Let alone
yeah, exactly. Not that we used Napster ever. No.
Yeah.
Sorry, James Hetfield. It wasn't me. I didn't do it.
But one of my favourite series that you guys do is your Complete History series. They must be a pretty big job to make. I mean, I saw your Nintendo 64 one recently. What did you find interesting about the history of the N64?
To be honest, I mostly find the 64DD to be interesting. The fact that they would call something the Nintendo 64 Double D is kind of impressive. And people didn't bat an eyelid at it. And all of these, like, I guess I find the attachments that they were thinking of making for the N64, that's the most interesting thing, because they never really released any. The only thing I really remember was the Rumble Pack and the thing that came with Pokemon Stadium, which used just Pokemon Red and Blue, and that was it. Well,
they had the graphics expansion pack as well.
Oh, of course, the RAM
perfect
thingy.
art.
But yeah, they had like the 64DD. They were going to have an internet connection thing. There was actually a game released on the N64 which did have an internet connection, but it was only in Japan, and it was it had like a phone line port on the cartridge, which is ridiculous. But they had like tons of ideas for that system, and I just wish they had sort of kept going with it to a degree. To be honest, Nintendo has always made bold kind of ideas that never come to fruition, and that's one of their faults, I think, is they will come up with an idea and go, this is great, start putting it together, and then just give up. And it's understandable with some of the stuff they've come up with. They actually have a quality of life thing that they're still trying to sell. They had like this idea for a device that you keep, I think it's like supposed to be next to your bed, and it will recognize how well you sleep and the quality of your life, basically. And it would give rewards for games and stuff. I can't fully remember what the idea is, but they are still working on it. They said in their recent sort of business gathering thing with all of their investors that they're still making it. And everyone kind of thought it would die. Do you remember like the pulse sensor thing that they announced for the Wii?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of like they, at the same time, they had that, and they were going to use it with other systems and ways of detecting how healthy you are.
See, gaming, it's a fun hobby, but it's never been the healthiest.
No, exactly.
Sitting on your sofa eating Doritos. Yeah.
I think that's something about Nintendo which I kind of appreciate, is that they've recognized that, though. They've always kind of tried to do things that will kind of combine both things. The Wii is clearly like a more active version of a games console. The Wii Fit is about being healthy and determining your weight and everything else. They had a bike for the SNES. They had a glucose monitor for the Game Boy Advance. I mean, it's crazy stuff that no other company, no other console developer has really done any of that, you know?
They've got a good record of coming back as well. So, like, after the Virtual Boy, the N64, and then after the Wii U, the Switch and stuff. So.
Yeah. It's always dud, bomb, like an absolutely amazing console, a dud, amazing console, dud.
That said, I did like the Wii U. It's just a shame nobody else did.
The Switch is just a better version of the Wii U, really. It's the idea of the Wii U, but actually works.
And I think their biggest downfall was not really pitching it as a new console. It seemed like everyone thought it was an expansion for the Wii, Like you get this new cool controller, but they were like, no, it's a whole console, and everyone went, oh, okay, well, I can't be asked for that. So.
I was thinking of strapping a Wii U to my back and having a generator and then walking around so I could use it like a Switch.
Actually, I just want to say that I think that the Nintendo's current move, just because obviously E3 has just happened, I don't know when this will go out, but E3's just happened, and yeah, I quite like the direction that they've gone, where they've sort of realized that they have products they can still sell for the Switch, because they weren't bad games, but they're just improving them and putting them on the Switch. And I think that's fair enough, you know?
Well, let's talk a bit about failed systems. Have you guys got any maybe guilty pleasures? Is it, any of you fans of like the 3DO or the Jaggy or anything like that?
I think the Dreamcast, though it wasn't a truly professional flop, it wasn't what it was supposed to be, I suppose.
Yeah.
I think when I look back to playing Dreamcast games, there was some really, really good ones, and it's kind of a shame that it couldn't quite compete with it. Like going up against the PlayStation and stuff, they just didn't really. Well, PS2, they just didn't have a chance, which is such a shame because, like you mentioned earlier, Skies of Arcadia is it's a brilliant RPG. I think Alundra 2 turned up on there as well.
Yeah,
which is also a brilliant RPG. And you had Sega Bass Fishing, like all of these like really nice ideas and really quality games. But it's just that the Dreamcast was such a shambles, really, that it just didn't work out. And I just feel bad for it, really. I feel a bit guilty every time I think about it.
I think we played quite a lot of Dreamcast because our friend had one. And I remember going to his house all the time to play Dreamcast.
He had because they kept breaking.
Yeah.
yeah. Sign of a good console.
Yeah, look under his bed, there's 5 Dreamcasts and then one that works. It's like, okay.
It's crazy, though, because, the Dreamcast now has got such an active online community, and pretty much everybody in retro gaming forums talks about how, like, the Dreamcast is their favourite system, and it's amazing. So, in hindsight, it's a bit remarkable that it did.
Man down. Yeah, it's become like a cult console, if anything.
I think it's mostly the reputation of Sega that kind of keeps people interested in it as a console. People don't so much go, God, the Dreamcast was amazing. Everyone knows that it would break all the time and it had a lot of problems. But people love the idea of Sega making consoles because it was always the nostalgic Nintendo versus Sega, right? But now it's Sony versus Microsoft versus Nintendo. And Sony kind of feels like a latecomer, just like Microsoft. They just kind of came out of nowhere with their new consoles, and suddenly they were in the market. Whereas Sega was a classic company. They made the Master System, they made the Game Gear and the Mega Drive, Dreamcast is not so much a classic. So, well, I suppose it is now.
Yeah.
God.
I think it's also because Sony kind of went for the technology. So when you got the PlayStation 1, it had the CD-ROM, and then DVD was a massive thing for PlayStation 2. And Dreamcast was GD-ROM, wasn't it?
Cheaper than a DVD player, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And then Blu-ray was cheaper on a PS3. So.
Yeah.
And that's why it won, didn't it? Out of HD DVD and Blu-ray. It won because the PS4 or PS3 was far cheaper.
Yeah. And
well,
Sony,
on top of that, HD DVD was also just kind of poo.
Oh, yeah, totally.
But it really was Sony that kind of carried them to fruition.
Yeah.
And Sony make a little bit of money on every one of those discs as well, don't they?
That must sting at Microsoft.
I was thinking actually how different, because originally they pitched the PlayStation 2 Nintendo, I think.
Yeah.
So they were going to collaborate and make the PlayStation, but Nintendo kind of stepped back from it. They didn't like the way it was going. And I just think how different things would have been if you had the Nintendo PlayStation and then, you wouldn't even think about Sony. I mean, they'd still be there. Their name would still be around, right? But it wouldn't be quite so synonymous with PlayStation and gaming.
I think that the reason Sony kind of still has that massive grip on the market is just because the PlayStation 1 came at a time where it was revolutionary and good, like, don't get me wrong, I'm all for the PS2, PS3, PS4, but the PS3 logically would be the Dreamcast of Sony if it wasn't for the reputation that Sony held from the PlayStation 1.
And I think as well, the fact that you mentioned then that when we interview people on this show, it kind of seems like there was gaming before PS1, than gaming after. It was like such a revolution, wasn't it, when it came along?
I suppose it's like 3D gaming, isn't it? That's the real change. The only sort of proper 3D games before the PlayStation that people really played besides PC gaming was like, I don't know, just Elite. Does that count?
Well, there's someone like the 32X and like that Virtua Fighter and that, but it was all very polygons and stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those games, I went back and tried to play them. They are not good.
Well, it's before texture mapping, really, wasn't it? I guess that's what the PS1 brought with it.
Yeah. And I mean, God, it makes all the difference, man.
And the soundtrack as well, full CD and Wipeout.
Wipeout, yeah.
I mean, Wipeout, Castlevania Symphony of the Night. It's one of the best video game soundtracks.
Still listen to that soundtrack because it's so good.
It's glorious. It's an absolute masterpiece.
So when you're kind of watching videos on YouTube and you see someone like Slope's Games Room do a complete history, are you like, they've already done that history, damn, that's one off the list?
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes we go, Guru Larry has talked about this. We can't bring it up because everyone will get angry then.
Yeah.
Because people on YouTube tend to, if we talk about something that somebody else has mentioned briefly, they'll assume we've stolen all of our information from them. Kind of annoying. So we'd rather talk about things that other people have, if they have talked about it, they've not talked about it in the same depth. Or, I don't know, it's like...
Or try and look at it from a different angle, I suppose.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we've talked about Sega and Nintendo. I mean, are you guys kind of divided then? Is there any rivalry? Any Sega fanboys and Nintendo fanboys in your camp?
We grew up with both, me and Greg. Matt was always Sega.
I was totally Sega. But I still came around and played Nintendo. I dreamed of having an N64 and stuff. But I don't know. They both had their sort of merits and things. And we weren't sort of fighting over it.
I think that, as we've gotten older and older and older, we've kind of realized that you shouldn't really treat a games company as your friend. Things like a console being amazing and nostalgic, they were, but they had their faults. And that's something that I've been trying to get my head around a little bit more because, you always go, the Mega Drive was the bomb. It was, but they also completely buggered it up when they re-released it and screwed up the sound chip. So Sega weren't always doing the best for their console. They were just trying to make the most money.
Yeah,
which
that's
is fair
what
enough.
They all do, isn't it? Which is, I mean, it's kind of how it works. But I agree. It's like getting your head around the idea that they're not really making games for you necessarily. It's like it's a huge machine that makes loads of money, and then you have to take what's good, take what's bad. There's no sense picking a side anymore.
Yeah,
it was easier when you were a kid because it's like my brother had a Nintendo, I had a Sega, and I was like, my Sega's way cooler than your Nintendo. What are you talking about? Mario's for kids. Sonic's cool. He's rad.
Are you hoping that Sega will ever get back into the hardware market then, Matt?
No, actually. Honestly, I think I actually love Sega's sort of mentality right now that they're pretty keen to make fun of themselves in the past and stuff. But with things like Sonic Mania, I kind of feel like they're slowly going into the right direction of maybe, I don't know, sort of coming back to some of their classics but making new versions. And I like the fact they're bringing people in that have made their own versions of Sonic, and they've recognized that talent and brought them in and things. But I kind of think it's not worth them going into the console market again. I think they should just be focusing purely on their games.
I think that Sega is now considered one of the top end third party publishers, right? So when they're owning that market, I say owning, they're releasing some good games. I think they can stick with it and still be reputable. And if they go back into making a console, they could be as big as Nintendo again. They could be as big as Sony, but the struggle they would have to go through to reach that, in the same way as we look back and we go, wouldn't it be great if they released a new Atari? And then they made that stupid Atari thing that got loads of money on Kickstarter.
The Atari VCS.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, what can they offer as well that is different from Nintendo or Sony or, Microsoft. Like, you look at Sony and Microsoft, there are so many similarities in their games, and Nintendo have their own kind of market. Sega really have to find something that separates them from all of them.
Well, just like they did in the 90s, right? They did that, like, we are the cool ones for the teenagers.
Yeah, totally. But are they still cool and for teenagers?
Sega are making a Sonic the Hedgehog toaster. So I'll put that out.
Oh, yeah.
I actually, to be fair, it's one thing that I think about when I look at the games market at the moment is that, the PlayStation 4 is a PC in a box. It runs on Linux. The Xbox runs Windows. These are just computers now, whereas Nintendo has made the Switch, which is a portable device, and it runs sort of on a new architecture of Android, really, I think. I'm not 100% sure about that. But if Sega were to go back into the market, they couldn't go into the PlayStation, Xbox market because they wouldn't have a chance. So the only thing that they could possibly do would be to make a cheaper, sort of child-friendly, retro-like console where it would only be able to really have exclusive or old games. And that doesn't really sort of fit into the market these days.
Well, like the Mega Drive Mini, you mean?
Yeah, exactly. They all of those games already exist. The only thing I'm sort of thinking is Sonic Mania is a new game that would likely run on low-end hardware, And that is such a popular game at the moment that it's their main selling point. And that would be the only thing they could do. I mean, they can't compete with the big boys.
Well, talking of Sonic Mania, are there any other kind of classic Sega franchises you'd like to see kind of get the Sonic Mania treatment?
Oh, I would love a new 2D bloody Toe Jam and Earl. That would blow my mind.
Story of Thor, which one I'd like to see brought back to life. An excellent RPG. Came out around the same time as A Link to the Past, so it kind of flew under the radar a bit, I suppose. Because obviously can't compete with Zelda, can you?
I think everyone wants a new Streets of Rage game as well, surely.
Of course.
A Comic Zone. I'd love a Comic Zone 2, just drawn so incredibly well.
You could do it so easily with like a cell-shaded style as well.
Oh, yeah, you're on the... that's a good one. That's a good one.
Got a little bit too excited there.
Speechless, yeah.
So I was wondering what YouTubers you guys watch as well, and if you recommend any kind of new stuff as well for our listeners.
I mostly sort of watch, to be honest, mostly non-gaming stuff. It's sort of Philip DeFranco and iDubbbz and H3H3, these kinds of commentary channels, I suppose. But in terms of gaming, Game Hut. No one seems to really know about Game Hut, and it's a guy who worked on a ton of Sega games back in the day, and he just gives out trivia that people didn't know because he hadn't told them. And I think that's really cool.
It's all stuff from his computer and things from when he was making, say, Sonic 3D and Sonic R and stuff like that. And he's just finding this stuff in his house, and he's like, oh, I'll just upload this up to YouTube and things. It's really interesting things.
I really like big fan of Jim Sterling.
Oh, big boy, he's the best.
He's like the pinnacle of, for me at least, the pinnacle of sort of video game journalism because of his sort of no nonsense attitude. That's where that sort of don't trust them necessarily aspect came from, because he really points out that he's happy to point out the flaws as well as genuinely enjoying the products they create as long as they're good,
Well, so, can you tell us more about the Region Lock series that you mentioned? Because that's really interesting, just games limited to a certain region.
So Region Locked was made it was originally me and Greg, and now it's obviously all three of us. But it was basically, back in the day, we used to play fan translations of ROMs because there was no way you would ever have played it because it never came out in your language.
To be honest, half the time we didn't even know that they were fan translations.
Yeah, so we would just play these games and then go, oh, okay, that's why it is kind of badly written. It's because it's badly translated by some random person on the internet, which is, in retrospect, kudos to them. They couldn't do it very well, but they still did it, and that's impressive. But the show is about games which never came out in sort of certain countries. So there's games that were exclusive to Japan or exclusive to Europe, or we've actually started to look at games that were exclusive to America.
Much harder to find.
Yeah, because it's mostly just Madden games and sort of football and all that boring stuff, which you can kind of expect what they're like. But Japan has some crazy stuff. They're so experimental and just things which you wouldn't even imagine somebody coming up with.
Because I know Ravi's actually starting to collect for the Saturn at the moment, so you've got a few surprises from Japan there, Ravi, I think.
Oh, yeah. And you know what? Symphony of Night on the Saturn is actually a really good version of Castlevania, or Nocturne in the Moonlight, as I believe it's called. It's got like an additional area to the PlayStation 1. It's got some extra familiars and stuff. The Saturn version is actually better than the PlayStation 1, but it was only released in Japan. So it's like Japan tends to get the better deal with a lot of games. Not always, to be fair, but most of the time. And once people can translate them, that's when you're onto a winner.
Yeah, you were mentioning those ROMs with translations. I remember playing, you couldn't get all the Final Fantasies originally in like a kind of series. So I remember playing fan translations of Final Fantasy, and you'd get some really weird language in there and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
When we were kids, I'll never forget getting Pokemon Silver with a fan translation, because the Pokemon names were never translated at that point. So they all just had really random names. There was, I think, Feraligatr was called Fertilizer.
But that's where all your base came from, didn't it? A bad translation.
Yeah.
Zero Wing, what a game. I mean, it's terrible, but what a game.
There's a lot of games that did that, though, that they weren't translated properly, and at the end it'd be like, congratulations or something. It was like...
Yeah, I think it was Ghostbusters had like, it just said Riri. It didn't actually have an ending.
And congratulation.
Oh, and congratulations, yeah.
Yeah, they just gave up by the end.
Well, finding, rare and obscure games is always exciting. I mean, obviously we've got the traditional route of eBay, but what about you guys then? Have you got any places that you get your games from, or any like little maybe secret places that you go to?
Not really, eBay. Sometimes we've had in the past, we've had people offer us sort of rare games and stuff, which is really nice of them. Like things which are early versions or sort of prototypes of games, which is absolutely amazing. The idea of people just willing to send them our way is so kind. But realistically, we don't actually buy a ton of games at the moment. I think we because everything's digital, But for the retro collectors, there's a few shops around Norwich which we pop into from time to time. There's that one on St. Benedict Street, if anybody is from Norwich and they fancy taking a look.
Last level games. Charity shops are always a good bet as well. You'd be surprised what you can find in charity shops, to be honest. People just ditching their whole collections.
And car boot sales as well.
We must get unlucky around here, because whenever I go to charity shops, you get like a PlayStation 2 copy of FIFA 2001 or something. That's all I ever find.
It's because I've been first, Dan.
It's all about determination. That's all it is. Just keep going back, and you never know, man. You never know.
6 a.m. at the car boot sale, and you get some bargains.
Yeah.
So do you guys collect yourself? Like Greg, do you have a big wall of like your favourite systems or games?
No, I'm not much of a collector, to be honest, as it happens. I just live in the memories, No, I just, because I tend to, if I start collecting one thing, I'll collect a million. So I've tried to stop myself from doing that, because I know how much I could go down that hole into just having a pile. Matt, however, has quite the collection.
Yeah, speaking of going down into the hole of collections, I have Metal Gear Solid collection to a horrible degree of getting one of every version from every country just because the artwork's slightly different, or, varying T-shirts. I have the Metal Gear Solid 5 Light, like torch, from Amazon, because there was one. They just slapped Solid Snake, Big Boss on the front of that, and I just got some really weird stuff. But just anything Metal Gear Solid, I'll buy it.
I don't know. Ask how much you paid for the torch.
Well, actually, that was pretty cheap, but I've paid some ridiculous amounts for some stupid things. But yeah, I'm trying to think what else I've got in there. But just hundreds and hundreds of games.
I think the best thing you got was the collection of all of the games in a single box that you just found on Amazon. in the collectibles section.
Oh, totally, yeah. And I think I got it for like $5, and it was like some Japanese really nice case. But the thing is, I have all the games anyway, many times. I have so many variations of Metal Gear Solid 2.
My personal favorite from your collection is the book. It's got to be.
Yes, the best retelling of the plot of Metal Gear.
Oh, yeah! So I've got Worlds of Power, the old like NES book series they did with the sort of the how to read kind of books, and they released Metal Gear before anyone cared about Metal Gear Solid. This is the the MSX NES Metal Gear, and they rewrote the story with Solid Snake, and he's from the Snake Men, and they're heading off into battle, and like I can't remember what his real name was in it.
Yeah, I started to do a reading of it that I wanted to put out as a video, but then I realized it's actually a terrible story. Like, it's just really bad.
I'm actually looking it up because I've got to find what his name was. But yeah, it's ridiculous.
So ultimately, what are you going to do with it? Are you going to give it to someone to inherit, or Valhalla style, be buried with all the Metal Gear Solid stuff?
Definitely get buried with it and continue my collection after death. Like, I just want it like forever. I don't know. I think at some point I'm just going to get incredibly poor and end up having to sell it all. But yeah.
Have a fire sale.
When that YouTube money runs out,
that's it. When YouTube goes, I'll be selling my collection on the streets.
What about you, Daz? Have you got a big collection of consoles and games?
My collection has become spread across lots of places, and I don't really know how much I have anymore. I recently moved back to Norwich after living in Peterborough, and I sort of had to get rid of quite a lot of it and spread it around a little. So I've not really been doing the whole collecting thing at the moment, but I've been sort of starting to consider collecting video game soundtracks on vinyl, just because they're really cool. And there's sort of some good companies out there re-releasing the soundtracks in super high quality. And I just think that's the kind of thing that I really want, because I'll use it, but I just enjoy looking at it as well. It's different to sort of game cases and consoles and stuff, because with those, I would want to have them hooked up. Whereas you can just look at the vinyl covers and the sleeves and everything, and it's just appreciating artwork,
And also, if you check those older vinyl releases, there's some absolutely awful cheesy ones, like the Super Mario Land wrap and stuff that that's available.
I still have the CD of the Super Mario Compact Radio Disco, I think it's called. It's the Super Mario Compact Disco, and it's got like a song about how Mario is cool, like sunglasses, and it's so true. There's songs about having to save Princess Daisy, even though Peach is singing it. Like loads of weird crap that it's just the worst album you could ever find, with skits in between where they talk to Yoshi and stuff. Really, really cringy, but it's the best thing I found in the charity shop.
I think, Ravi, you've got the Tetris song, haven't you, that was in the charts?
Yeah.
Who did that again?
Oh, man.
Oh, God, Dr. Spinner. Andrew Lloyd Webber, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, guys, it's been wonderful getting your memories, and, you can tell just from the way you guys come across, that you've been lifelong mates who just enjoy video games, which I think is what makes your channel so special. What are kind of the future plans for Did You Know Gaming, then? Is there anything we should look out for?
We've got a few ideas. There's some stuff in the pipeline, actually quite a lot in the pipeline at the moment. That said, I suppose we can say that we want to try and bring Did You Know movies up a little bit, because people seem to really love it, and we're not sure how or when or anything, but it's just a thought that we have, that maybe kind of trying to push it a little bit more. But that's not really to do with Did You Know Gaming, that's Did You Know Movies. But it's the same team, And
what about like live events and stuff? You got any more plans to do those?
We'll be turning up at CoxCon next month.
Yeah, CoxCon.
We're not on a panel or anything, but we're just going to turn up, hang around, be there, be present. Yeah. I think that's the 21st of July.
That sounds about right. I mean, we're always trying to go to events because it's fun, talking to fans and everything else. It's one of those things with YouTube, actually, which is we don't really get to interact with the fans like a lot of other things. And so when you go to an event and suddenly people go, "Oh, I really love what you do," it means a hell of a lot to us.
Yeah, because you never see
because...
the feedback, do you?
Yeah, exactly. Most feedback is on comments.
Yeah, so
and
YouTube comments. What was it John Oliver said? YouTube comments are the most cogent argument for never learning how to read.
Well, Greg, Matt, Daz, it's been amazing chatting to you guys. Thank you so much for joining us, and just
Thanks for having
keep
us.
up the good work.
yeah, absolute pleasure, man.